Mark Aguirre was one of the best scorers to ever touch a basketball. He had so many tricks in his bag, as he could drive to the basket and bully his way inside, back down defenders in the post, pull up in the mid-range, and spot up from three. But he grew up close to another Illinois legend in Isiah Thomas, and they would face off in high school and college, and be chosen back-to-back in the 1981 draft. Mark was the #1 pick of the Dallas Mavericks, a franchise in its second year in existence. They hoped Mark would be the star they needed, and he was proving them right early, dropping 29 points a game in his third year as he became one of the league's top players. But his 7 years with the Mavs would be full of playoff disappointments and multiple conflicts with coaches and teammates. By 1988, Mark had worn out his welcome with Dallas, and was more than happy to accept a trade to Detroit, where he could play alongside his childhood friend. He was a better fit for the Pistons than Adrian Dantley, as he helped them win back-to-back titles to end the 80s. Although Mark had a run where he averaged at least 22 points for 6 years in a row and shot over 48% for his career, he still isn't in the Hall of Fame, as a lot of people feel like his character issues may be a factor. But nonetheless, it's surprising given his production. But today's video will look at one of the most complete offensive players ever. Welcome to PZ Hoops, and let's get down to it. Mark was born on December 10, 1959 in Chicago, Illinois. He grew up playing ball on the West Side playgrounds, starting his high school career at Austin, but when the coach was fired, he transferred to Westinghouse Prep. During his senior year, he led them to a city championship. They made it to the Elite Eight of the state tournament, even beating a St. Joseph's team that featured Isiah Thomas, as this was the first time their paths would cross. Mark was a McDonald's All-American, a third-team Parade All-American, and Mr. Basketball USA. The best high school prospect in Illinois chose to stay close to home, committing to DePaul. The Blue Demons had a solid team, with guys like Gary Garland, Curtis Watkins, and Clyde Bradshaw, but Mark was a #1 option from the start. The biggest concern, however, was his weight, as he reported to the first fall practice at 253 pounds. But as the season progressed, Mark slimmed down to about 230, and he was playing like one of the best players in the country already. He dropped 29 in the season opener against UCLA, 28 on Eastern Michigan, and 22 on Air Force. He led the team on a 9-game and 8-game winning streak as they finished the season 21-5. Mark averaged 24 points, 7.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, and 1.5 steals on 52% shooting. The Blue Demons faced USC in their first tournament game, as Mark dropped 25 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists on 10 of 13 shooting. He dropped 19 in the win against Marquette and 20 in the regional final win against UCLA. Mark dropped 19 points in the Final Four against Indiana State, but Larry Bird put up 35 points, 16 rebounds, and 9 assists, guiding the Sycamores to a 2-point win. Mark took out his frustrations in the consolation game against Penn with 34 points and 13 rebounds. DePaul secured another great high school player in Terry Cummings, as he and Mark would form one of the best duos in the nation. Mark would somehow improve on his freshman season, as the Blue Demons were extremely hot, starting the season 25-0. They would finally lose to Kelly Tripucca's Notre Dame squad by 2, but rebound with an easy win over Illinois State. DePaul had the 9th ranked offense in the country, and they had been ranked #1 since the middle of January. Mark was the engine that powered the best team in the country, so he was rewarded, being named the AP Player of the Year and earning a first-team All-American selection. Mark averaged 27 points, 7.5 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals, as the Blue Demons faced the Bruins in the first tournament game. Mark had a solid performance with 19 points, 19 rebounds, and 4 assists. But UCLA shot 53%, as DePaul was eliminated a lot earlier than people expected. It was the same regular season dominance by DePaul in 1980, as they won their first 13 games, including a blowout of #3 UCLA. But they would shockingly lose to Old Dominion for the first blemish on their record. They won out the rest of the schedule to finish the season 27-1. Mark had another All-American campaign, averaging 23 points, 8.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 1.5 steals, and a block. DePaul faced St. Joseph's in their first tournament game, as this was a low-scoring affair, but they were up by 1 with 3 seconds left. But they would let John Smith score the game-winning layup to send the Blue Demons packing early again. Mark was a member of the 1980 Olympic team, but America was boycotting due to the Soviet Union being involved in the military invasion in Afghanistan. After 2 straight All-American seasons, Mark didn't have anything else to prove in college, so he declared for the 1981 draft. The Dallas Mavericks had the first pick, and they chose Mark instead of Isiah Thomas. This was a surprising choice, as Isiah was touted as a #1 prospect for months, but reports came out that he tanked his pre-draft interview with the Mavs because he didn't want to play for Dick Motta, a coach who always ran his offense through his forwards. The Mavs won 15 games in their first season, but their new rookie class was promising, as along with Mark, they drafted Orlando Blackman, Jay Vincent, and Kurt Nymphius. Mark would already start his career with controversy, as some concerns about his attitude were made public right after the draft. One report even said that Mark had as many moods as moves on the court, but he would quiet those concerns with his play early on, averaging 24 points in the first 20 games, including 42 points and 8 rebounds against Golden State. The Mavs were losing a lot, but their number 1 pick was living up to his billing. But on December 9th against Kansas City, he broke his foot in the fourth quarter and he would miss 2 months. When he returned in late February, he was used off the bench, a decision he initially didn't agree with, but he took in stride. Jay picked up his play a lot in Mark's absence, while Orlando had a solid rookie year. As a new expansion team, they were expected to lose their fair share of games, but a 21-54 record was an improvement. Mark averaged 19 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists in his rookie season. The reports about Mark's moodiness were validated, as he went into a depression during his foot rehab, missing multiple workouts and being fined, which led Coach Mata to dig into him, as he wanted his top pick to carry himself as such. Jay Vincent led the team in scoring as a rookie, and with his hot streak during Mark's injury, some were wondering if Mark was really the guy. But he came into his second season in better shape mentally and physically, and he would establish himself as one of the best forwards in the league. In the second game of the year, he dropped 30 points, 6 rebounds, and 8 assists. He was proven to be a better passer than people thought, as he had 5 games with double-digit assists, including his first career triple-double on January 14th against Denver, with 30 points, 11 rebounds, and 16 assists. Mark also used his strong frame on the glass, as he had 11 double-doubles this year. He ranked 6th in scoring and 7th in free throws made, as he had the highest usage rate in the league, so the Mavs were all in on Mark. Dallas' offense was ranked 5th, as he had 6 double-digit scores, but they struggled to stop anyone from scoring. Their 38-44 record wasn't enough to make the playoffs, but they were trending upwards as a franchise. Mark averaged 24 points, 6.5 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal. Dallas hit on both of their draft picks in 1983, selecting Dale Ellis and Derek Harper. They were one of the youngest teams in the league, as they didn't have a player older than 28, and Mark would have a season for the ages. He flirted with a triple-double in the season opener, with 26 points, 9 rebounds, and 8 assists. Mark was scoring at an insane pace, averaging 29 points in November, 32 in December, and 30 in January. He then dropped a career high of 46 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 steals on March 24th against Denver. He had the ultimate green light, as he led the league in shot attempts, but he was still efficient, shooting a career high 52% from the field. Mark was second in scoring behind Adrian Dantley, while Orlando had a breakout season, officially becoming the second option. Jay Vincent had a noticeable drop in his production, but the most important thing was that Dallas was winning, as their 43-39 record secured their first ever playoff berth. Mark was the first All-Star in franchise history this year, averaging 30 points, 6 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and a steal. The Mavs faced Seattle in the first round, as Mark dropped 20 points, 11 rebounds, and 3 assists in the Game 1 win. He dropped 27, 17, and 5 in Game 2, and 26 and 6 in Game 3, but Dallas lost both. He averaged 27 and 10 over the next 2 games, as the Mavs won Game 5 in an overtime thriller. The Showtime Lakers were next, but this would be a tough challenge. Dallas was blown out in the first 2 games, as Mark failed to crack 20 in either game. He put up 21 points and 8 rebounds in the Game 3 win, but his best performance would be in the Game 4 overtime loss, with 34 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists. He only played 14 minutes in Game 5, and Dallas would be blown out and eliminated. The Mavs drafted Sam Perkins in 1984, while Mark started out the season well, averaging 23 points and 6 rebounds on 46% shooting and 48% from 3 in the first 20 games. He went off on January 28th against Philly, dropping a career-high 49 points along with 9 rebounds and 3 assists. All in all, Mark dropped 5 40-point games, 7 double-doubles, and 18 games with at least 5 assists. He finished 8th in scoring and ranked in the top 15 in three-point percentage, but he wasn't named an All-Star. But Rolando was, even though he averaged under 20 points a game. Jay had a much improved season, while Sam had a solid rookie year. The Mavs were the best 3-point shooting team in the league, and that helped them finish 44 and 38, making another playoff appearance. Mark averaged 26 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists, as Dallas faced Portland in the first round. He put up 27 points, 14 rebounds, and 5 assists in a Game 1 win in double overtime. He dropped 20, 30, and 39 in the next 3 games, but Dallas lost all 3 and were eliminated. Dallas was focused on the front court in 1985, drafting Detlef Schrempf and Bill Winnington, while also trading for defensive center James Donaldson. Sam entered the starting lineup, while Derek and Brad Davis shared point guard duties. Mark dropped 22 and 11 in the season opener, while recording his second triple-double on November 23rd against Indiana, with 25 points, 13 rebounds, and 12 assists. He even had a stretch in late February where he was blazing hot. Mark had 13 games with at least 30 points, 11 double-doubles, and 3 games with double-digit assists. He led the team in scoring again, but Orlando was the only all-star in the Mavs this year. James Donaldson really didn't help their defense, but their offense was second in the league, so they finished with the same 44-38 record. Mark and Coach Mata would consistently butt heads throughout the season, as one famous incident happened in the game versus Atlanta, where Mark was benched for helping Dominique get up off the floor after a foul. Afterwards, Mark refused to re-enter the game. He still averaged 23 points, 6 rebounds, and 4.5 assists, as the Jazz were their first round opponent. Mark dropped 19 in Game 1 and 27 in Game 2, both Mavs wins. After a 10-point showing in Game 3, he put up 28, 7, and 8 in Game 4 to help Dallas close out the series. The second round brought their second chance to beat the Showtime Lakers. Mark put up 14 in Game 1 and a near triple-double the next game, but the Mavs were down 0-2. He came back in Game 3 with 27 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists, and 2 steals to help Dallas get on the board. A 39-point and 10 assist Game 4 helped Dallas tie the series. Even though James was averaging a double-double and shooting 78% for the series, he couldn't do anything with a 38-year-old Kareem, and that made the difference in the last 2 games, as LA won in 6. Dallas addressed their frontcourt depth by selecting Roy Tarpley in 1986, as Mark would take him under his wing, especially since he already had substance abuse concerns in college. Mark continued his great production, dropping 33 points, 13 rebounds, and 3 assists on January 9th against Denver, and a season-high 43 points on March 24th against New Jersey. Mark was expanding his range this year, taking 150 threes while making 53 of them. Mark was finally named an All-Star again, while Derek Harper made the second team All-Defense. Speaking of defense, their bigs were playing well, as 3 players averaged over a block a game, but it was almost like a routine to see Mark and Dick's disagreements being broadcast in the media. In the game against Detroit, Mark had gotten a tech after arguing foul calls. Dick begged him to calm down, but Mark continued to argue, leading to his ejection 20 seconds before halftime. The two would get into a shouting match in the locker room, with Dick calling him a coward and a quitter. The thing that made it worse was that Derek Harper, a good friend of Mark's, was so upset at his lack of discipline that he shoved him in the back as he left the court, calling him a jerk. This game really mattered for the Mavs, as they were having their best season yet, and they were fighting for playoff positioning. Even with this incident, they still finished 55-27, winning their division and securing the franchise's best regular season up to that point. Mark averaged 26 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal as the Mavs faced the Sonics in the first round. Dallas had drafted Dale Ellis a few years earlier, but with their star players being wings, he never had an opportunity for a lot of playing time, something he wasn't happy about. He took this series as his chance for revenge, averaging 30 points and 8 rebounds, while shooting 50% from 3. Mark did his thing too, averaging 28 points in the first 2 games, but he struggled in games 3 and 4 as Dallas suffered yet another early playoff exit. The 1987 Mavs will have a new guy on the sidelines, as Dick's relationship with Mark had reached an all-time low, so his resignation led to the hiring of John McLeod. This was also the last real chance that the current Mavs squad had to win a title, as they had the deepest roster since Mark's arrival. He was doing his usual work this year, averaging 27 points and 6 rebounds on 49% shooting, and 34% from 3 in the first 25 games. He had 22 30-point games, 10 double-doubles, and 2 games with double-digit assists. Mark was 8th in scoring and named an All-Star for the 3rd and final time. James joined him at All-Star Weekend as an injury replacement to Steve Johnson. Roy Tarpley took a huge leap in year 2, taking home the 6th Man of the Year award. Derek continued to get better while Sam played his role. The Mavericks were a top 10 team on both sides of the ball as they finished with a 53-29 record. Mark averaged 25 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists as the Mavs faced the Rockets in the first round. Hakeem went crazy this series, averaging 38 points, 17 rebounds, 2.5 steals, and 3 blocks, but the Rockets didn't have much else outside of him. Mark was pretty quiet until he had a 38-point outburst in the closeout Game 4, dropping 27 points in the third quarter as Roy really came into his own, finishing as the series' second leading scorer. The Nuggets were next as Mark dropped 26 in Game 1, 34 in Game 4, and 25 in Game 5 to help the Mavs win in 6, making their first conference finals, and as you might expect, they had to get through the Lakers. But they would put up a fight as this series went to a do-or-die in Game 7. The Mavs were only down by 1 at the half, but they would end up losing by 15. A lot of people accused Mark of quitting on the team late in Game 7, but this is a claim that he's continually denied. Mark was playing his usual brand of ball in 1988, even dishing a career-high 17 assists on November 23rd against Denver. But Mark's relationship with the Mavs organization would reach its final straw this year. The Pistons have been a playoff contender in the East for a few years now, but Isiah Thomas and others were not fond of Adrian Dantley, as his ball-dominant style slowed down the offense. Also noticing that Mark was disgruntled in Dallas, Isiah asked the Pistons to trade for him, and they did, swapping Mark for Adrian, as this deal marked the end of a pretty successful tenure in Dallas. But Isiah wasn't the only player that was happy about the trade, as some of Mark's former teammates went to the media with some scathing comments. Yesterday was Valentine's Day. This should be an all-day party. Am I happy? Believe it. We're working hard all game long to keep these guys off the boards. Here comes Kersey, even Vandeweghe getting offensive rebounds. You look at who's supposed to be guarding them. Mark. He's just loafing. If you don't want to play, ask to come out. I won't miss Mark. What I'll miss is knowing that he could be such a great player. Someone who can make you better. It's a big shame. He was the one manipulating everything to make sure he's gone. So just realize we had nothing to do with it. This would be a good trade for the Dallas Mavericks. Who cares about Mark Aguirre? But none of these comments matter now, as Mark was now teammates with his best friend. The Pistons were a very deep team, so although Mark was a starter, his production dipped a lot. He still had his moments, dropping 31 points on 12 of 16 shooting on February 25th, and 20 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, and 3 steals on April 9th against Milwaukee. With players like Bill Laimbeer, Dennis Rodman, Rick Mahorn, and John Salley, Detroit's defense was among the best in the league. They finished with a then franchise record 63 wins, as Mark averaged 19 points, 5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists. The Pistons blazed through the first 2 rounds, sweeping the Celtics and the Bucks, as Mark put up modest production. The conference finals would be a dogfight with the Bulls, as Mark's best performance was a 25-point showing in a Game 3 loss. He was still scoring efficiently, but he was taking half as many shots as he did in Dallas. But he provided good rebounding and passing, helping the Pistons beat the Bulls in 6, securing a rematch with the Lakers in the finals. Mark dropped 12 points and 10 rebounds in his finals debut, and 14 points, 6 rebounds, and 2 assists in Game 2, as these were both Detroit wins. Mark only scored 4 points in the next 2 games, but Detroit had won both to surprisingly sweep the Lakers and win their first ring. Back in Dallas, they went 13-24 after the trade and missed the playoffs. Mark wouldn't be the primary starter in 1989, as the Pistons really liked Rodman's defensive versatility. But in this reduced role, Mark had the lowest scoring season of his career up to that point. He still provided the offense that Detroit needed, recording 15 20-point games, including a season-high 31 points on December 16th against the Warriors. He wasn't as mobile as he used to be, so he became more of a spot-up shooter, finishing 3rd on the team in 3-point attempts. Rodman won the Defensive Player of the Year, and Detroit's top defense countered their lackluster offense. But a 53-29 record was still great. Mark averaged 14 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists, as he came off the bench for most of the playoffs. They easily swept Indiana and beat the Knicks in 5, as Mark had 25 and 8 in the closeout game. The conference finals brought Chicago again, but the Pistons would win a scrappy 7-game series, as Mark's best performance was in Game 3, with 22 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 steals. Detroit would meet the Blazers in the finals, as Mark dropped 18 points and 8 rebounds in Game 1. He only averaged 7 points on 32% shooting over the next 4 games, but Detroit took the series in a gentleman's sweep to win their 2nd straight title. The Pistons' 3-peat hopes would take a hit in 1990, as Isiah was dealing with wrist issues, as a 34-year-old Vinnie Johnson would be forced to start. The Pistons were one of the older teams in the league anyway, as 6 of their major contributors were over 31 years old. Joe Dumars would step up in Zeke's absence, as Dennis won his 2nd straight Defensive Player of the Year award. Mark was exclusively a reserve this year, only starting 13 games, but he still dropped 16 20-point games and 2 double-doubles. He was the leading bench scorer on a team that was trying to work around Isiah's injury. Their defense carried them to a 50-32 record, as Mark averaged 14 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists. The first round series against Atlanta was a lot closer than people expected, as Detroit needed 5 games to eliminate them. Mark would be in the headlines again during this series, after he refused to re-enter a game after being scolded for missing a defensive rotation. But unlike in Dallas, Chuck Daly took accountability, saying he might have stepped over the line. Isiah sprained his foot in the second round against Boston, but Mark would step up, dropping 24, 8, and 4 in Game 2, and 34, 4, and 6 in Game 4 to help the Pistons advance. They faced the Bulls in the conference finals, but Michael Jordan was on a mission. Plus, it didn't help that Isiah wasn't at 100%. Mark had an excellent Game 1 with 25 points on 9 of 16 shooting and 3 3-pointers, but Chicago easily won this game and the next 3 to ensure there would be no 3-peat, as Vinnie Johnson was Detroit's leading scorer in the series. In regards to the incident during the Atlanta series, Mark would say this: "Why should I apologize when I didn't do anything wrong? I was just following Chuck's instructions on the play. How can I not be considered a team player? I made numerous sacrifices to make this a better team. I sacrificed my starting position, I sacrificed minutes, I sacrificed getting more money. I wish that those who wish to criticize me would look at the broader picture instead of one incident." Amongst all the off-court drama, an unnamed Pistons team official even told the media that there was no way Mark would be back on the team next year. But alas, Mark was still a Piston in 1991, but Detroit's championship window was all but shut as Lambert continued to decline, leading to Sally getting more minutes. New acquisition Orlando Woolridge provided a nice scoring punch for them, as Mark was declining as well. He could still play, dropping 11 20-point games and 2 double-doubles. Detroit's offense continued to suffer, but Rodman had the best season of his career, averaging 19 rebounds a game and making his first All-NBA team. The Pistons' aging core was still good enough to compete, but their 48-34 record was their worst since 1985. Mark averaged 11 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists, as the Pistons faced the Knicks in the first round. Mark didn't shoot well at all, as he was actually one of 4 Pistons to shoot under 37%, leading to them losing Game 5 and the series. Chuck Daly had left to coach the Nets in 1992, as Detroit was in a weird situation this year. They weren't championship contenders, but they also weren't bad enough to get a lottery pick. Especially with John Sally leaving and Bill continuing to be less effective, the Pistons were desperate for front court help, as they employed Terry Mills, Odin Polynice, Mark Randall, and even Jeff Ruland. Our 33-year-old Mark wasn't a big part of the rotation this year, appearing in just 51 games. He still showed up in spurts, dropping 24 points and 5 assists in the second game of the season, and 22 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists on 8 of 12 shooting against the Timberwolves on January 29th. Joe Dumars had the best season of his career, while Rodman continued his elite rebounding. Zeke would be an all-star for the last time, but the Pistons weren't as good as they used to be defensively. With their offense still lacking, they finished 40-42, missing the playoffs for the first time in a decade. Mark averaged 10 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists. Even though Mark's last name is pronounced Aguirre, his father was from Mexico, so it can also be pronounced as Aguirre, but Mark never acknowledged this pronunciation. Mexico even offered him citizenship to convince him to play for their national team in the 1992 Olympics, but Mark would never suit up for them. Detroit knew that the bad boy era was over, so Mark was way before the start of the 1993 season, but he was signed with the Clippers on October 25th. The Clippers were led by Ron Harper and Danny Manning, while Mark Jackson and Louis Vaught played meaningful minutes, but this team was far from competing. Mark would have a small role off the bench, but he was producing pretty well, especially as a 3-point shooter. But then he would be waived by the Clippers on February 1st, as they wanted to evaluate rookie Bo Outlaw. In his final NBA season, Mark averaged 11 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists. Mark would retire after this season and is currently working as a special assistant to the athletic director at his alma mater, as his number was retired by the school and he was inducted into the College Basketball Hall of Fame in 2016. Mark Aguirre was one of the best offensive talents the league had ever seen. He had so many ways to score, making him nearly impossible to stop. Mark had the extremely difficult task of bringing a new expansion team to relevance, and he did just that. By year 3, he was averaging almost 30 points a game and had led Dallas to their first playoff appearance. By year 7, the Mavs were 1 game away from the NBA Finals. But unfortunately, the Mavs could never get over the hump, especially with the Showtime Lakers dominating the league. But there were some negatives, as Mark's emotional issues were often broadcast in the media, making this a huge distraction for the team. He also wasn't the most liked person, as evidenced by the comments from his former teammates after he got traded. But when he joined the Pistons, he was a perfect fit for them, as he adjusted to a new role, helping them win back-to-back titles. Once the new decade started, it was a steady decline for the Pistons and Mark as well. But despite his highly productive 7-year run with the Mavs, his jersey number still isn't retired by the team. An even more puzzling fact is that Mark still isn't in the Hall of Fame, a head-scratching omission to say the least. But regardless of how you felt about him, Mark was nearly unstoppable with the Mavs, as he was their first star, being the engine that powered them in their first few years of existence. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate y'all, man. A lot of people have different opinions about him, because you can see that he was such a great player. He was such an excellent player. He was such a dynamic offensive player. He could do everything. He might be one of the first 3-level scorers ever in the league. Dick Motta was an old school coach, and him and Mark just never saw eye to eye. Him refusing to enter games didn't help either. I think the Mavs were a great center away from competing. They were a great center away from competing because they were complete every other way. They just needed a better center. I mean, Donaldson was good, but he wasn't beating Kareem. He wasn't going to stop Kareem. At least he was able to help the Pistons get over the hump and win the titles, especially since him and Isiah were really such best friends. I don't know, man, it's just crazy because he only made 3 All-Stars, which really confused me. I'm looking at the stats. I'm like, how are you averaging 26 points on a playoff team, but yet you're not an All-Star? You weren't hurt. You didn't miss any games. You weren't an All-Star, but somehow Orlando Blackman, and this is no shade to Blackman because Blackman was a great player in his own right. We're talking about 19 points a game over 26. This happened a couple times. And I think that kind of screwed up his Hall of Fame chances. He wasn't a perfect guy. I'm not going to just completely absolve him of anything. But I feel like he was unfairly judged a lot of times, like a good amount of times, especially like in terms of like, give this man a couple all-stars, man. If he's averaging 25, 26 a game and like he's being double teamed all the time and the team is winning, like reward the guy. That's all I gotta say. He definitely should be in the Hall of Fame. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate y'all. Turn my post notification on if you haven't already. Leave a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new. But I'm out. Peace.